I noticed one of the headlines today, and this is rather prophetic. It's 100 days
Yes.
of Mark Carney as prime minister, and this now on the same day where just a couple of hours ago, Mark Carney talked about trade in the U.S. and tariffs. So, Tom, from what you've heard, what do we make of this?
Well, it looks like Carney has stopped negotiating against himself, which is good news, because when we removed the famous tax on digital services, we got, in return from the United States, bupkis. We got nothing. So he stopped doing that. We had put tariffs on a lot of the things that should not have been tariffed under the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade deal. What does that mean in practical terms? Well, the whole time we were heading into these tariffs, Trump was careful never to reveal exactly what it was going to be on. And when he finally hit, he was hitting all of the things that are not covered by CUSMA, that trade deal, the successor to the NAFTA. And why is that important? Well, how can Trump say that he wants to renegotiate that deal if he doesn't respect the one that exists? But we're the ones who weren't respecting it. And I'm not 100% sure that the people closest to Carney realized that the people who were drafting these things in the respective government agencies and departments had actually led them down that path, although Carney's a pretty quick study, so I suspect he would have learned it quickly. They left it there. They left those tariffs in place. And I think it's easy to read into it that this was part of the conversation he had with Trump yesterday. So he's announcing today that we're removing tariffs on things that are free of tariffs under the Canada-U.S.-Mexico deal. Smart move, the right move. And if it comes, the White House is saying, oh, well, it's long overdue. It's a good thing that they're doing this. It's part of a dance. It's a relationship, and we're trying to set it under new terms. Canada is doing the right thing. Trump gets to say, you see, I was right. Now they've had to remove more tariffs. Now we can sit down and talk. The thing that they talk about the most, Aaron, on the U.S. side is something we call supply management. That covers dairy, eggs, and poultry. And frankly, it's a drop in the bucket to the Americans. But for them, it's a question of economic principle. You can't have government agencies saying how much dairy products you can produce, how much milk, how much eggs, and so forth. For Canada, it's a much larger country than the U.S., but with a much smaller population. And guess what? We have farmers who own their own farm, and it's not these big aggregators that come in and buy everything up. So it's the way we've been doing things in Canada, and they will not give it up. Anybody who gives that up is doomed politically. So the U.S. will keep trying to use that as a bargaining chip, but for now, I think that today, on his 100th day in office, this was one of the few mistakes that Carney had made. The other one, of course, was his government's abysmal handling of the Air Canada file, but that's slowly but surely starting to be taken care of as well.
All right, let me point to a couple of things in his statement just earlier this afternoon. Number one, he went out of his way to point out on several occasions that this new deal with Canada taking away any of these other retaliatory tariffs means Canada has the best deal, his words, of any country in the world. Now, that sounds great to hear, but then, of course, you have to factor in steel, aluminum, and autos, as he did, saying, by the way, those tariffs are still in place. So are we that far ahead, Tom, really?
We are. If you look at the overall trade pattern with the United States, thanks to that Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade deal, I know it sounds like a Trump-like boast. We've got the best in the world, but it actually is. If you look at the other big trading partners, the European Union, Great Britain, for example, yes, we're doing a heck of a lot better. But it doesn't mean there are not a lot of irritants in there. And the fact that we're maintaining tariffs on aluminum and cars from the States simply means that has to be negotiated as well. So we're doing the right thing there.
What about this idea, and I know it's one of the questions he was asked, which is, you know what, here we go, yet again, Canada backing down. You mentioned the digital services tax. There have been a couple of other areas. Does it make us look like we're the ones giving in here at the end of the day?
I don't think we had a choice on the digital services tax, frankly, even though it is a basic rule of negotiation that you don't keep putting stuff on the table if you haven't negotiated something in return. If this thing had kicked in and we'd collected billions of dollars from those companies, we would have had to give it back. The legislative implications would have been enormous. The bureaucratic implications were huge. And he simply took the decision to pull the plug. And it was, frankly, a good faith move on the part of Canada. So it was a good thing overall. But again, it just simply gave Trump boasted that Canada had caved. I mean, this is the class of the guy that we're dealing with.
So are we now elbows down, elbows up is all over with?
I think that maybe gloves off, but the elbows are down. Might be the best way to use the hockey image, in the sense that we're ready for the fight if we need it, but I think that cooler heads are prevailing. We are looking at the fact that we've got this trade deal, but by the way, that trade deal is only good until 2026, and then it has to be renegotiated. So we should start that right away. which is something, by the way, to his credit, that Premier Legault has said since day one. Let's not wait. Let's start the negotiation process immediately, because we're dealing with a bunch of alligators here, and they're not going to be doing us any favors. They're there for one thing and one thing alone: the United States. Past deals and friendships and cooperation be damned.
Yeah.
They're there for themselves. It'll only last a couple of years, and believe me, there's going to be a whiplash on this thing when it comes back, because there are going to be a lot of countries, starting with the Europeans, who are going to be waiting for them once the Trump era is over, because this doesn't last. You can't continually levitate by economic bootstrap the basic rules of how the world works. And the world works with freer trade, where you're on an even playing field with predictable results. Trump thinks he can throw all that out the window, and everything works in the U.S. favor after that. Sorry, that's not how life works. That's not how trade works.
Let me move on from that and talk about something that came up this week. Lucien Bouchard, of course, the former PQ leader, deciding, and by the way, he's involved now in negotiations with the government, representing medical specialists, which is interesting. But beyond that, came out and basically said to Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, look, my take on this is, he said kind of, you know what, you have a chance to win this next election. Don't screw it up. And the don't screw it up is don't bring up this whole referendum idea in the first term. What'd you make of that?
I've been watching the reaction from sovereignist writers, and they're all up in arms. How dare he stick his nose in this? He was the one who fought back against France's Clarity Act and so forth. But he's just talking a basic truth. And I got a chance, because he was on one of the TV shows that I do. And frankly, the guy's a phenomenon of nature. I mean, he's going to be 87 this year. We know what he's been through on the health front. And he was out there pummeling away. They tried to drag him on the show that I was on. He had already given interviews during the day, and he had gone pretty far down the political path. Here he was starting to reel back and say, I'll give you a separate interview on politics, but it was the cat was out of the bag. And why he was trying to do that, of course, is because he wanted to talk about the negotiations with the medical specialists, which is fine. But he can't have it both ways. The only reason he was given those stages is not because he's the lawyer for the medical specialist, because that person, whoever it would have been theoretically, would never have gotten on all of those TV shows. It's Lucien Bouchard and his ability to talk about other things, including politics. But all that being said, what he was saying is, for two reasons. One is, it's a very bad idea and it could hurt your chances of winning. Two, if you do it and you do have a referendum and we lose a third of referendum, it's curtains for any thought of Quebec independence. So he himself, Bouchard, didn't seem to be throwing in the towel on the idea or the goal or the aspiration of Quebec independence. He's just saying that the public's not there. I don't know if you've seen this, but a lot has been made over the past couple of weeks about some supposed information in the tea leaves that, younger people are more sovereignist. This just in. I've been teaching university since I left politics, and there's no strong desire for sovereignty amongst young Quebecers. They want to have a decent job. They want to be able to play by the rules in a society where everybody's given an even chance, and they do not want sovereignty. And in fact, interestingly enough, when the polling was done by Léger this week on this, it's still at 36%. It's been roughly one-third consistently throughout the past 40 years. So stop kidding yourself that all of a sudden there's young people and they're going to be leading the way and leading sovereignty out of the desert. It ain't going to happen. People look at this and say, things are already slippery enough as it is. We've got the crazy guy with the orange hair south of the border that we're trying to deal with. We've got so many issues here, from healthcare to the education system, that's falling apart. The last thing we need is a leap into the void to have sovereignty. But it doesn't mean they're not going to try, because unfortunately for the Liberals, their newly minted leader, Pablo Rodriguez, isn't exactly lighting the world on fire. I mean, the Liberals were in single digits in the most recent by-election just last week in Arthabaska. And frankly, Aaron, that doesn't augur very well. It means that they'll hold on to their Montreal seats, which apparently was the top priority for all of the members of caucus, who all said to everybody in the Liberal Party, yeah, vote for Rodriguez. He's great. Yeah, he's great for you because you're in Montreal, but you won't get anything outside of Montreal, and you have no chance of beating the PQ, which is sad, because I think that it would have been the Liberals' turn, or they should at least had a fair shot at it. I don't think they do now.
So last question to wrap up, given what Lucien Bouchard had to say, and given the fact, of course, that he almost got it done in 95, it's interesting you mentioned reaction now from sovereignists, like pushing back against this. You think PSPP is, if I can use the word, smart enough to heed that advice, or is he going head first, do you think, and going to go ahead with this idea of a referendum?
The first indication that I had that listened to that, because every single PQ leader, including René Lévesque, always tried to soft pedal what they were up to, what they were trying to get. oh, it's this, it's sovereignty, association, but association with whom? Like, who are you to say there's going to be association after sovereignty? So this is the game that they've always played, because they know the numbers that I just gave, that it's about 1/3 of Quebecers who would actually, vote in favor of outright sovereignty. So what he's looking at is the fact that Bouchard is fundamentally right. He's sworn up and down that he's going to have a sovereignty referendum. And the problem is, for him, of course, is that if he starts soft-pedaling it, people say, oh, you're just like all the other ones. He has started soft-pedaling it. Aaron, I was on one of my French TV shows before the summer. He was on, and instead of talking about a referendum, because they always ask him the question straight up, but why are you keeping insisting that there's going to be a referendum? He says, what's wrong with a consultation? He could not say the word referendum. It was not going to pass his lips. It was a consultation. It's just sort of like, I'm going to ask you what kind of coffee you want. That's a consultation, And so they are going to try to soft pedal it, and that's why it takes really good, strong politicians to push back against that. But unfortunately, I don't see that on the Federalist side in Quebec right now, and I especially don't see it from the CAQ. I think that the fact that they got 7% in that same by-election, they're a spent force, and Legault knows it, but I think he's going to just probably wait till December, a little bit like Trudeau, December or January, to announce that he's going to call a leadership, and the party's going to find in its ranks another brilliant leader to lead them to the promised land.
Brilliant in quotation marks. Tom, it's great to have you back. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
All the best.
Bye-bye. Take care.